Do you believe in premonitions? To see a future act before it happens? This was a question I asked my mother one day. She surprised me when she replied, "Oh, I don't believe in premonitions, except for that one time." I was immediately curious and pressed her for details. Before I was born, my mother liked to sit in a lawn chair in the backyard, down near the creek that flowed past our property, and take in the sun and sounds of nature. It was just something that she did often. She continued, saying that one day she looked up into the forest and saw something that did not make sense to her. At the top of the hill, she said there were two people dressed in white standing together, not actually looking at her, but just standing there. She said it was like seeing them from far away, even though it was only 40 meters or so. She said she felt like she was next to them, and yet not there at the same time. It was a very strange feeling, she said. I asked why it felt like a premonition, and she said it was because she had this profound feeling that at least one of the figures was her own child. This was before my brother or I was born. She remembered this distinctly because it was such an odd and specific idea to jump into her mind. I asked if she'd ever had this happen again, and she said no. Several years later, I took a photography class in college. When it came time to take pictures of people, I chose to snap pictures of family and friends. By then, my mother had stopped sitting outside in the sun, as she had in the past. She had moved to a bench that we kept at the top of the hill, much closer to the house. As chance would have it, the weekend I was home, my brother was there, and I asked him and his friend to pose for my assignment and snapped a few photos. We took several more photos in different positions, and then my brother got bored and we finished up. Later on, I developed the film myself and noticed that I had captured more than just the two of them standing at the top of the hill. In the background, there appears to be a folding chair in the middle of the field near the creek. This is more odd because I had sworn those chairs had long worn out and been thrown away years before this, and yet there was a chair in my photos. I showed the photo to my mom, and she closely examined it. Then she said, "It's like looking back through time." I decided not to show her the photo that I found most interesting. This photo I took at the top of the hill, where I managed to capture everyone. In it, my mother is looking off into the distance, as if she is looking at a spot where the chair appears. I do not recall seeing that empty chair in the field when taking the photos. The whole thing is very odd, as I never saw that chair again. It seems as if these two events, totally unrelated, were somehow intertwined, separated by 20 years and linked by my mother, who had described the incident in detail to me a few years earlier. Could this have been a premonition of her future son? Does a mother know? I spent my junior year of college as an architecture student in Versailles, France. It was a challenging yet exciting year, and there were only a few times that I recall feeling stressed. This story recalls one such occasion late at night as I walked home from the train station, having spent the day in Paris. The students in my French school were assigned various places to stay in and around Versailles. I was set up in a nice home on the edge of town, which was actually closer to the neighboring village of Porchefontaine. It was their train station that was often my choice when going to and from Paris. The route back home was a bit of a walk, but I can make it in about 15 minutes. One single aspect of my walk that I did not enjoy, especially at night, was a long stretch of dark street that ran along the city park and was poorly lit. There were times when you could barely make out where you were stepping. There were only a few feeble streetlights, but this was the only direct way home. High garden walls, locked courtyards, and buildings blocked the other practical routes. One night in late October, just before Halloween, I returned to Porchefontaine on the train late at night at about 11:33 p.m. It had been a mostly empty train, and I was looking forward to a Halloween party planned by my fellow American students, set for just a few days later. At my stop, only a few other people exited the carriages, and I started my trek back through the nearly empty streets. The lights of the station receded behind me, and the darkness of the narrow lanes and stone train bridges spread around me. As I started across the wide boulevard north of the station, which was the only open and well-lit portion of the walk, I noticed, far behind me, a dark figure walking a similar route. This person must have been on the train. There was no other direction he could have come from. I thought little of it and turned toward home. It was amazing how quickly I became alone as people went off in different directions into the night. As I neared my turn down the long and dark side street, I noticed the same dark figure matching my path and getting slightly closer. It seemed as if he was watching which way I was going. I steeled my resolve and turned right into the long, foreboding street I disliked so much, and was rapidly enveloped in the darkness. The only sounds were my footsteps and late autumn leaves rustling. I began to think that this other person would also turn down some other lane or walk past the mouth of the drive. I was some distance along when a sound made me turn and glance back. The figure appeared at the entrance of the street, still a ways off. I was sure he could not see me, as I was in near total darkness. This person was distinctly silhouetted against the lights of the distant boulevard. My apprehension grew, as the figure had appeared much sooner than I would have expected. It was as if the moment I had turned the corner, my follower sped up so as to not lose me. I was hidden only by the darkness of the lane. Although closer than before, we were still separated too far for me to make out his features. I began to walk a bit faster, with great effort to muffle my strides. I glanced back again, and the figure was just standing there. He seemed to try to peer into the dark. Did he hear me? We were just close enough that I was not sure. Did the distant street noise seem to muffle my retreat? There was a single weak streetlight at the halfway point, and I realized I would become visible as I passed under it. I stayed close to the side with the homes and parked cars, and then as I approached the light, I quickly crossed the street to the even darker side with its high garden wall. As I retreated into the darkness, I turned again, and the figure seemed to be gone. I paused and listened, feeling a bit safer in the near black shadows. I heard footfalls, not fast, but resolute and moving closer. I moved briskly away. Being familiar with this road, I felt I had a slight advantage. I thought I heard my pursuer stumble on some uneven stone or tile in the gloom. As I neared the end of the lane, a taxi appeared, passed me, and sped into the black tunnel behind me. I paused at the corner and watched as the headlights cut a sharp cone of light, receding into the murk. For a brief moment, I saw a figure half hidden in a courtyard alcove, but much closer than I had anticipated. I darted to the left, toward home, and broke into a light run. I was resolved to put as much distance between me and this person, now even closer behind me. They wouldn't see me until they reached the corner, and the bright taxi headlights may have prevented him from seeing my turn. When I could see my house, I slowed and stopped to look back. No one appeared. I moved on, and at my gate I glanced again. Far off I saw the figure appear where the taxi had passed. I slid behind the fence gate and watched, half hidden. The figure paused, looked up and down the street. He then crossed over and paused one last time, looking in a protracted manner down each way. Then he simply turned and continued to the north, not seeming to realize that I had turned westward. That night, as I drifted to sleep, safe in my bed, I wondered who this person was, his intentions, and if I had just been lucky and I had avoided some worse fate. It is ironic to think that the dark and foreboding stretch of road that I found so unnerving had, in its dark stretches, hidden me and kept my follower from overtaking me, and who knows what else. It seems that sometimes the darkness is your friend, and that night, I was the elusive man on the train. I had two great aunts who owned a small farm south of Indianapolis. It was a short drive south of town, and I had visited it a few times over the years. It was just off the road, down a dirt path and across a river near a small pond. This pond was fed by a tiny spring that gurgled out of a nearby hill. After my aunts moved to a nursing home, my father would make regular trips to check on the property and various buildings. One early fall day, with nothing to do, my dad asked if I could help him out and drive down and check on the property for him. I had my friend come along to make it more of an outing. She had never been there before, and I described what we would be doing. We needed to go to the cabin near the pond, check the place for any storm damage or repairs, and make sure the rest of the property was okay. We drove back into the wooded site, and then followed the mostly overgrown slate walk to the cabin. I took out the key for the walkout basement door. The basement was dark, except for a few windows. It was cold and dusty, as no one had been down there for close to a year. There were some cobwebs, and everything had an unused feeling. Walking upstairs, it appeared less decrepit, even though the wallpaper was starting to peel. The thought that someone else was possibly maintaining the cabin was somewhat frightening. We methodically checked all the rooms, the last room on the right being the master bedroom. My friend mentioned that this bedroom felt like someone maybe was living there. I mentioned again that we were the only ones with access and a key. The house had been locked up tight for months. When we entered the master bedroom, we were met by a chilling sight. On the bed was a large china doll, propped up on the pillow at the head of the bed. I've always found china dolls somewhat off-putting, feeling as if their eyes are following me. I felt a shiver run down my spine and sensed those china doll eyes upon me. Then, as if on cue, I saw the doll move. I don't remember sprinting from the room, but we were both down in the basement in seconds. Neither of us wanted to discuss the possibility that we had seen the doll alive. I remember fumbling with the lock, making sure that it not only kept anyone from the outside entering, but kept anything inside from coming out. As we rushed to the car to leave, all we could say was, "That was so scary." I never went back inside the cabin on Crooked Creek. A few years later, my great-aunts died, and the land was divided up and sold. The cabin and small pond remained for many years, slowly being overtaken by the forest. I wonder if everything had been removed from the cabin, or if it just remained as we'd left it. I still think back to the remote site, the long drive through the deep woods to the creek and the pond. I try to ignore our last visit inside the Crooked Creek cabin and the lonely little inhabitant we met there.